Hello everyone, welcome to part 7. Where we left off last time we were putting up the second layer of plasterboard. This sat on a layer of green glue which stuck directly to the first layer of plasterboard. What you can see here is us about halfway through this task. It was a long and arduous process because we had to try and line up the studs with measurements alone. This often didn't quite work out, which meant we occasionally tried to screw into something that wasn't there and just went straight through the plasterboard. You can see a lot of lines where we've attempted to mark the studs, but we're essentially doing this blind. I think I mentioned this last time, but throughout the whole plasterboarding process we used between 4,000 and 6,000 screws, and if you think each one of those needs essentially tightening by hand to make sure they sit underneath flush. They can't just sit flush, they need to be actually beveled into the plasterboard itself to make sure the finish is flush. Anyway, we did manage it, and after we'd got the ceiling done there were no more mishaps with snapped or broken boards, so that was quite nice. Here you can see is just fitting in one corner piece. That wall on the right hand side is already done, and here you can see another piece being finally fitted. We've already gone over a lot of the joins, taping them and filling them for a finish. We're not going to bother putting wallpaper on the walls. For those outside of the UK who may not be aware, wallpaper is our standard decorating tool. Most houses, when decorated, have either printed pattern wallpaper or plain wallpaper that you paint on top of, just ensuring a smooth finish for painting. But because this is more of an office, we're not going to bother with wallpaper, we're just going to paint directly onto the plasterboard. This means we can paint it and skim it and sand it pretty easily, and redecoration is easy, but it does mean we have to prepare the plasterboard well in advance to make sure the finish is smooth. The process took even longer than you might think because every piece had to be trial fitted first. Here we're just putting it into position to make sure it fits, having already trimmed it numerous times. Then we remove it again, sweep it down and add the layer of green glue. Then finally we can put it back into its final position and screw it in permanently. We did this with 20 boards on the first layer and then 20 more boards with green glue on the second layer. There were 40 plasterboard sheets in total. This really was a long and tedious section of the build. With all of the plasterboard sheets now in position, another tedious process involved filling every gap and then filling every screw, going over it, smoothing it and sanding it. There were a couple of thousand screws on the top layer alone, but thankfully we only had to do the ones that were in the middle of the sheets. The edges of the plasterboards we chose are actually beveled and slope inwards, so because they were already beneath flush we didn't need to fill those. Joints are taped and filled, giving us a smooth finish to paint over later. What you're seeing here is, again, pretty standard construction process. There's nothing in here that's specially geared towards its purpose. There's nothing here specially soundproofed. There's nothing here to say it's a music studio as opposed to any other room in a house. This is just standard procedure when putting up plasterboards. Here we're just adding a layer of undercoat, and there you can see on the wall a few patches of colour where we're trying different colours. The waterproof membrane is cut away once everything's done, and we're actually nearly there. I know I've said that before, but when you've got coloured paint on the walls, that's a pretty good sign. Again, we go around the room filling any gaps with sealant, and we just want to try and make sure everything's as airtight as possible, excluding of course the vents which I need to live. We installed a simple door frame, and we actually added some additional soundproof seals inside once this door frame was finished, but there's nothing particularly special about this door frame. It's standard wood, just made to fit around the door, but it looks nice when it's painted and it provides a nicer finish than just having the door flush. With that done, the majority of the construction work is finished, so I brought in some help to clear out the room, and some ingenious tools help us actually make us start painting the ceiling as well. You can see where all the joins have been sealed, so it's just a case of adding the undercoat and making sure that everything is smooth for painting. While you're seeing this, I'll just recap on what's going on outside, because the inside of the room will be finished long before the outside is finished. Since recording this, we've actually installed the guttering for drainage on the outside, and we've extended the trench depth for the electric cabling which goes across the garden. We still haven't cladded it, and we still haven't connected any power, but as I was saying, you can see here we've now painted the inside and it's essentially ready to use. The doors and windows are finalised, the decoration is finalised. I picked a nice light colour with the big window which hopefully works with the natural light, Again, to reiterate, this is essentially an office, so it needs to be somewhere nice, somewhere pleasant to be, somewhere that lets in natural light and isn't too dark and prison-like. Here we've added a layer of waterproof sealant on the floor. This was just painted directly onto the concrete. This soaks up any moisture and provides a seal for the bare concrete. We'll discuss flooring later on. But now really it's just a case of adding the fittings. As you saw earlier, there were some bare cables sticking out. These aren't connected to any power, so they're not dangerous, but they look unsightly. So now it's just a case of adding on the electric fittings. Here you can see the active air vent going on, and there's the main fuse board where the mains power is connected from the house. As for distributing power around the room itself for the plug outlets, we opted with a trunking system that connected to the walls themselves. This system has numerous benefits. Firstly, while it sticks out of the wall a few inches, it allows you to connect the cabling all around the room without having to drill into the walls at all, apart from that first entry point where the cables come into the room. It's also incredibly flexible. It means at any point you can move any of the sockets because you have instant access to the cabling and can add or remove as necessary. So while you lose a few inches in the room itself around waist height, the flexibility and the added isolation from not having to drill into the walls is really nice. I know I've rushed through a lot of this episode. I didn't intend to, but the truth is a lot of what we're doing here is just finishing up and is standard process for finishing a room. There's very little here that's distinctly related to building a drum studio or a soundproof room, and I really wanted to just give you an overview of what's going on without going into too much detail on standard things. Here's a quick shot of the cabling going in, and here is what it looks like when it's all finished. Those are the switches and the fuse boards added directly into the trunking, and those are the electrical outlets which can be moved and relocated at any time, as I said. As you can see, when it goes around the whole room you lose a couple of inches, but the trade-offs for isolation and flexibility are really worth it. So that's the room itself essentially finished. In the next episode, which is likely going to be the last one, I'll conduct the proper tests and give you decibel readings from in the room and various distances outside of the room. But for now I'm just going to show you a quick test I did where I play the drums in the room as they are and filmed from about 15 feet away on the camera, just to give you some idea of where we are at the moment. You can still hear the drums, of course. It was never going to be silent. That's not practically possible, but we're actually really pleased with the results. You can just about hear it from various points in the garden, but from anything over 20-25 feet away, which thankfully encompasses our garden, you can't hear anything at all, and you certainly can't hear it from within the house. So overall, we're really pleased with the results. Next time I'll show you more proper detailed decibel tests and how we finish the room with various bits of acoustic treatment and of course some carpet. So thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next one.